So for this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Lover's card. And I just want to jump right into this card. I think it's just one of the most important cards in the deck. I just find that there is so much about learning about bringing in duality and opposites in this card that it just really brings that whole concept home for me. So let's start by looking at the RWS card and really exploring some of the symbols on here and thinking about what those mean. So first of all, first thing that jumps out to me is that the people are naked. And to me, that is a symbol of being vulnerable, but also open and really dropping illusions, really letting yourself, others, the world know who you truly are. And so that they can really see you and connect with you and not something that is, like I said, not real, an illusion. And that's important when it comes to true connection. So I think that knowing ourselves is an important part of that. What are our passions, desires, challenges, and being honest with ourselves about that is important with this card. So we have the tree in the back. There's an apple tree in the back with a snake on it, and that's symbolic of temptation and really knowing what those temptations are in life, because this card really does ask us to make a choice, to make a commitment, and to not deviate from those patterns in order to bring together polarities, duality, shadow, light, and make those things work in our favor. We'll talk more about what that means in a moment. But those things can be intense. Our emotions, desires, passions, and there's this volcano in the background, which I think represents that intensity. It represents not just the intensity of our passions and desires, but also the intensity of bringing together polarity. So if you think about it, even on a scientific level, when we bring together opposites, there can be extreme reaction to that. Think of throwing a piece of ice on a hot frying pan, or just bringing together atoms that have opposite stabilities. You know, maybe they want to gain or lose electrons. There's an intensity in that chemical reaction. Fusion, fission, those types of things, whether it's bringing something together or separating something, they can have intense ramifications. So that's why that volcano's in the back. But as far as the commitment is concerned, I love on the New Era Elements Tarot how it shows an older couple and how that can be an example of hope. That can be an example of just what it means to follow that commitment, to stick with it, no matter if it's being committed to something internally within yourself or to another or to the planet. The next thing here is on the Myths and Legends Tarot. This is an amazing card because the figures are skeletons. And it's about loving someone to the bone, to their core, because you know them down to their bone and down to their core, because you've allowed them to show that to you and they've been willing to show it. That's just an amazing image. And I think that it also provides a sense of hope, a sense of completeness to this concept. So like I said, this card really does bring in the energy of bringing in duality. But it involves, like I said, making the choice. And on the Hermetic Tarot, that choice has been made. You can see this guy and he's fighting, or he's challenging this snake. And remember I said the snake represents temptation. And it represents conquering our passions and desires and following our true will. And I think the sword represents our true will and making that statement, making that definitive decision and action and sticking with that and conquering anything else that might be on the exterior that might present itself as something that serves us but doesn't. So what are some of those shadows or some of those things that maybe challenge us? So on the 78 Tarot Mythical, I love that it has Aphrodite and it has Athena on it, because they really do represent these opposite figures that they've put together and shown a strength from that. So we have Athena, who is this warrior, leader, very full of wisdom. And then we have, also full of wisdom, we have Aphrodite, but she's more about passion and love, understanding, empathy, kindness, beauty. But these things can work together. You can take the best parts of each of these, combine them, and make something enhanced. And that's really what this card is about. It's about bringing in those things. And there's a whole concept for that in alchemy called the chemical wedding, or the alchemical wedding, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But before I talk about that, there are situations where you have to set up boundaries. For example, on the My Strange Tarot deck, you have this figure here that looks like a narcissist. And it looks like something that's draining or trying to drain the energy of an empath. So you have that narcissist empath relationship that can be damaging and traumatic. It can be abusive and harmful. And in those cases, yeah, you cannot incorporate that. And a good test for that is to see if it's bringing about more separation or if it's bringing about unity. So those things are important to look at, because when you're trying to unify and something is pushing separation, that's a key indicator that no, that is not the right direction or path to go in. And whatever it is whatever that shadow is that's trying to do that, it needs to be separated more before that union or a chemical wedding can take place. Separation is an important part of the process, the alchemical process. It's called dissolution, right? To dissolve or to separate. And we'll talk about that too. For me, one of the challenges I have is presented on the 78 Tarot Ecological. This is a huge one for me. I just don't understand it. And so I have to be honest with myself and examine it with myself and find out what that fear is. What is it? Why do I feel uncomfortable there? What is it about that image that bothers me? I'm not perfect. And at the same time, I know that there's something there. And so I have to deal with that. And being honest with yourself leads to progress, because you're understanding something. Understanding is a part of this card. This card is Gemini, right? Gemini is an air sign. So it's a very mental card too. And understanding is important because, like I said, you have to have that clarity, that open communication. Because if you don't have that, then there's a fear that can set in, because we fear what we don't understand. And I think that getting past that and dissolving something and breaking it down to its components and really understanding what these pieces are all about will help us avoid separation due to fear. So that's something that I think is really interesting. The Thoth card. Wow, the Thoth card has so much about separation and bringing together duality on it that I don't even think I can cover it all. I mean, first of all, you have the Emperor and the Empress there, which are a part of the alchemical wedding. I talked about this in my, I think it was Emperor video, how the Emperor forms the shape of sulfur, and the Empress forms the shape of salt, which are the two components of the alchemical wedding. And Mercury is the officiator. It's the one that brings together these elements. And that is displayed on this card with the Emperor and the Empress, and then the figure in the back. The figure in the back is either the Magus or the Hermit, depending on how you look at it. But the Magus represents Mercury, right? I talked about that in that video. And so this represents Mercury bringing together salt and sulfur. But there's some important concepts that I want to touch on that, but I'll do that in a moment. You also have twins there at the bottom representing Gemini. But the twins are opposite, one black, one white. And so there's that, there's that whole concept of, that struggle between fire and water. Also up at the top, I don't want to forget to mention, you have Lilith and then you have Eve. Now, why are they on there? It's because they represent life and death. They represent bringing together our understanding of life and death in order to come to terms with both of those things and not fear either one because both have a beauty to them. There's something interesting about this existence being not infinite. You have this Ark of Swords in the back. The Ark of Swords in the back represents the Hebrew meaning to this card, which is Zain, which means sword. And that's important because the sword cuts, right? And so you have to, like I said, be separated into pieces before being put back together. Sometimes life does that separation. Sometimes we do that to ourselves when we internally examine ourselves in a deep way. But that separation has to happen. And I think that sometimes that can lead us to a place where we may feel broken. But when we come together, when we find that thing that unites us with whatever it is that unites you, with maybe that internal divine spark within you, it doesn't have to be a relationship. It can be anything. But whatever that is, it'll make you better. I love on the tarot of the spirit how it has these two people coming together, one blue, one red. So they have these opposites. One kind of looks like it's forming the symbol of salt as it holds the other one. And then you have that symbol of Mercury right there in the middle, which represents the Magus, or it can represent the Hermit, bringing together the Emperor and the Empress in the alchemical wedding. Absolutely amazing, this card. So let's continue moving on here, and let's address this whole concept of unity. And we'll look at it by looking at the binary stars on the Lover's card from the Science Tarot. And I think that this card is really interesting because binary stars are a part of the constellation of Gemini. So when you have in that constellation two binary stars called, I think it's Pollux and Castor, they represent Gemini in a very beautiful way. So that relationship of these twin stars, it has to be balanced. There is a balance there in how these polarities work together. And we see that on the atomic level. When atoms come together, they form this potential energy as they get too close to each other, but then they separate just the right distance and they have this balance. Think of it as a spring. If you compress a spring, there's more potential energy because it wants to push back on your hand. But if you stretch it and you continue to stretch it, you get potential energy as it wants to snap back to its original form where nothing's putting any sort of force on it. So that sweet spot, that's the balance. And atoms will move around until they come together and form that. And that's how they form these covalent bonds, which are about sharing. And so these connections that we have are also about sharing. But with these binary stars, so much beauty comes from that. And so much support comes from that. And then we have fission, or actually fusion, on the Lover's card from the Tarot of Physics. And that demonstrates what I talked to you about just a moment ago with the atoms. So very interesting that they picked this for this card. So now let's go ahead and address the issue with the Magus, or the Magician, and the Hermit. Which one is the Officiator? Some people say it's the Hermit. Some people say it's the Magus. On the, on the Night Sun Tarot, we have the card for the Magus. And if we look at that card, it is the same person that is on the Lover's card doing the officiating. So they tapped into the energy of that being the Hermit. Even in the Thoth System, they say it's the Hermit. Now, there is this weird connection between the Magus, the Hierophant, and the Hermit on the Hermetic Tarot. And I think this deck actually gives us a big clue about this connection. And if we look at the names, it kind of spells it out. So the Magus, or the Magician, is the Magus of power. Okay, Magus of power. And then we have the Hierophant, which is the Magus of the eternal gods, plural. And then there's a different type of Magus with the Hermit. It is the Magus of the voice of light. What is the voice of light? It's not the eternal gods, right? It's not the gods of this realm. It's something else. And The voice of light, I think, goes beyond this structure. It's connected to our divine spark. It's a part of us. And within us, it's what we recognize within each other. It is that pull that we have towards each other because we recognize that divine spark within ourselves. That, I think, is the voice of light. That is an interesting concept. And that gives me so much hope. When I think about that, I feel a lot of love there. I really think that that is something that changes my perspective in a very beautiful way. So let's look at this card from the Navigators of the Mystic Sea. And I think this brings it home. I really love this image. You have these two figures, one red and one white, and they're representing opposites and they're coming together. One is sort of like a mirror of the other. But really what strikes me here is the figure on the beach. Look at the joy in that figure's face. There's this potion bottle there, as if it had some ingredient that it mixed in with these two beings that they recognize in each other. And this voice of light is watching that connection play out. Now, I think that that represents the true divine. There's divine and there's the true divine. So if we look at the RWS card, we kind of see that as well with the angel Raphael there. The angel Raphael is I think his name means healing. And he's there bringing these together, and he's symbolic of the healing that connects us to the divine. We see the sun in the background. We also see a bright light in the background on the Thoth card, which represent Kether, or that true essence of the divine, beyond the abyss, beyond everything that is an illusion. And that's the key, right? That's the focus. And so I want to cover one more thing here, and that is this card's connection to the art card. The art card is also known as the temperance card in the RWS system. So the temperance card, you see this angel mixing this water between cups, but it's actually the lovers doing the work. Because if you look at the figure on the art card, it is a combination of the lovers. You have some dark parts, some light parts. So it's a representation of the lovers that were on the lovers card. They have combined. And now that they've combined, now things happen. So I want to talk about the element that I want to talk about today, which is carbon. So if you haven't watched my videos before, I usually pick one element and discuss it a little bit, incorporate its energy into this to form a little bit of alchemy, and just kind of work with the elements on the periodic table a bit as I talk about a tarot card. And in this case, the card is going to be carbon, or actually the element is going to be carbon. And I'm comparing that to the Lover's card. And I think that that's perfect. I think it's perfect because carbon is about life. And I think that the Lover's card is about life. It's about entering this duality and having this physical experience. And life as we know it is based on carbon, but it also has a dual nature to it. If we look at carbon, on the one hand, carbon is coal, which is more fiery. And then on the other hand, it is a diamond, which is more watery. It represents love, but it also represents stability. So I think that both of those things are very different, but yet they are the same element. So there's this contrast within itself. And we often have that contrast within ourselves and with others. Graphite and diamond, same thing. Very different structures, very different purposes, but they're still the same. So graphite we can use to write. It has an airy energy. Diamond's an earth energy, more stable, stability, making the long-term commitment that we talked about earlier. So we see how that works. There are a lot of things about carbon. We use it in our cars, right, as fuel, fossil fuel. But the thing about it is it's also a pollutant. So we have to be careful with it. We have to truly understand and be transparent about how we use the things in our world and be honest about the effects of it in order to not have issues, to drop the illusions and the deception And that's the beauty of being open, right? And being vulnerable. Carbon also represents the chemical wedding or the alchemical wedding, because you have three things that come together to make carbon. 3 helium nuclei make carbon. And that's interesting because we have 3 things there for the alchemical wedding. We have mercury, salt, and sulfur. And then they're all very different. We have the Mercury there, which is the emperor. He's wearing this black sort of cape, which I think kind of relates to coal. And then we have the empress, who really does represent the white tincture on the Thoth system. And then we have the emperor, which has that fiery red, which relates to ash and things that are more on the fiery nature. So we have these opposite things coming together. We have the officiator there. And the interesting thing about coal being the officiator is that this form of carbon, we didn't think that it was crystalline. For a long time, until we had better technology, we couldn't see the crystalline pattern within it. And for some time there, I didn't see the voice of light as being a part of this whole process. And it's something that gives us hope. And I think that it's something that when we add that into the mix, that's a game changer for us all. And it goes beyond the magician, beyond the Hierophant. It's something new. And so that's what I want to say about this card. And I think that it's just a beautiful concept. So thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Will. This is Atypical Tarot, and I'll see you next time.